Wanted to start it off by thanking Miles and Adam for putting this together. This is a great event. This is the biggest turnout I've seen for like an SF new tech thing outside of Mighty. So awesome. This is actually way in the middle of the presentation. Maybe we could start in the beginning. Okay. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about contextualized designing, or designing for context, basically how to walk the walk when you're designing a user experience, an experience for an application that you're building, iOS, web, really whatever it is. So my name is George. I am a designer and I run a consultancy called Propeller Labs. We're an iOS design and development shop, and we work on really cool projects from end to end. So design, conceptualizing, all the way through development and execution, production. So the first thing that I want to kind of touch on is this idea that beauty is not enough. A lot of times you'll see inspiration boards, things like Dribbble, things like Behance, places where you'll be able to see a lot of design inspiration that people are creating, and it's really wonderful, but the reason why these designs that actually become applications become successful is because they design with context. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say today, is that context is really understanding why the application is being built, who it's being built for, really empathizing with your user and really learning their day and understanding who's going to be using this thing. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have any users, you don't really have a product. So the thing that surprised me was that we work with a lot of agencies, a lot of companies, people that have a process down. They read things, they read about how to build or design something. Things like, we're going to conceptualize, we're going to sketch, we're going to go through an interaction design, visual design, all these kinds of things. But sometimes they kind of gloss over this idea that they need to build a little bit more context into the research and the design for their applications. Things like asking the question like, when is the user most active? Where is your user engaged with the product most? Things that I feel like, people might feel like are implied, but aren't really, and you really need to dig a little bit more into that. The reason why this is important is because applications are becoming more prevalent day to day in every industry. So not just in the tech space or in like the design space, but also in banking and other really big industries. Mobile devices and basically anything that you could put an application on. The way that companies need to advance their companies to the next step is to build applications, build things with technology. And with that, you want to be able to instill good practices of user experience design. So if I was to ask the question to you guys right now, how would we design a checklist application? What do you think of first? You'd probably say something like, there needs to be lines that separate the different tasks, a place for people to be able to check things off the list, reorganize, things that you might see in your day-to-day applications. There's so many to-do apps out there that I'm sure you've been inundated with that. But that's the easy stuff. Realizing what to figure out there. So you don't understand the context if you don't realize that designing for your parents is different from designing for contractors. So you come up with one concept, one idea, but there's two completely different ways to be able to design for it. You have two audiences, two contexts that they're working in, and you need to be able to address that. So one for your parents and one for a structural engineer who inspects buildings under construction. These are very basic ideas, but can be applied to a lot of industries, which we've seen. So I have an example for you guys. This is an application we built for one of our clients, and it's a product that they wanted to modernize the flow of building inspections. It might not sound sexy, but it's a big industry, and they wanted to bring some innovation into the space. And so this was an app for a structural engineering firm. They wanted to streamline building inspections from the way they do it today, which is huge blueprints, and just a bunch of paper that they waste, and just like it's really hard to navigate. And the last thing, which is probably the most important thing, is that we had to cater to a very particular user. and this user was the building inspector. They kept on telling me that the building inspector is not like, people like us. They had different ways of doing things and different ways of seeing things, and so we had to take that in consideration. We really didn't realize what that meant until we kind of digged in a little bit more and walked the walk, try to figure out what that meant. And that meant a couple things. So the first thing is imprecision. A lot of the times these building inspectors would go into places and they would have, they would really want to go quickly through the process, click on things, accept things, go through the lighting fixtures and say, this is good, this is bad. And a lot of times they were also, wearing gloves or kind of clumsy with it. And so we had to kind of design or figure out a way to design around that. The next big thing was connectivity, and it's actually probably one of the bigger things within the application. These building inspectors probably went to remote places. A lot of them went to places not in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley, places that don't have LTE or even 4G connections that are stable. Sometimes we were brought up with the option of doing work in the Transbay terminal, which goes underground. And so with those kinds of context understandings, you have to kind of design around that. So that's what we did. We designed multiple layers within the application to address those problems. The problem of connectivity and being able to get the data they needed whenever they needed it. We considered ideas like caching and creating or implementing it with core data so that they'd be able to get all the information before they left to go on their inspection. Because there's nothing worse than getting to a place that you need to do an inspection on and having no data, because that's just a waste. Other elements that they wanted to kind of bring into it was just bringing this analog effect into their design aesthetic. So making it feel a little bit closer to what they were used to on a day-to-day basis, and also making the buttons huge. I resized those buttons 4 times until they were really happy about the size. One other example that I wanted to show you was a product called Linea that we were working on for quite some time. So the idea behind Linea was that they wanted to build an application that hosted all your photos and gave it to you whenever you needed it, all the time, wherever. One of the biggest things about this application was that people wanted to use them on vacations. People wanted to show people all their photos wherever they were, whether they were traveling or at home or on a bad connection. So access was one of the biggest things that we needed to understand within the context of this application. People wanted to be able to share these things on the go. The second biggest thing was the idea that the people that we were working with had this idea of scrapbooking or creating photo books, which is a very, physical process, dealing with the photos, organizing, doing a little bit of tilting on your images, placing things on top of it. And we wanted to bring that to life within the application so that they felt a little bit more at home and they felt like they could use this a little bit easier. So similar to what we did with Era, we broke it down a little bit more, and we kind of built the layers into an application so that the user would be able to experience the photos in multiple different layers. So being able to print, being able to edit, being able to view, these are the kinds of things that people wanted to do, but we didn't want to bring them back and forth and in and out of context. We wanted to make it easy for them to understand where they were. The second thing was designing, the top screen, which shows you a book, a physical book that people could turn the pages and really see what their book would be before they printed it and sent it out to their homes, which is huge. Some small technical things that maybe developers would be able to appreciate was the idea that we only showed the photos in the highest resolution that the devices were able to, or that the devices needed. And if people wanted to, let's say, get higher resolution photos, they'd just have to zoom in, pinch to zoom, and then they'd get the biggest picture that they needed. This saved a lot of time in loading images and things like that, which you'd be surprised at how it affects people's moods. So if we were to break it down, I guess elements of great user experience, you need to empathize with your user, so understand where they're coming from, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, basically walking the walk. Understanding why they do things, where they do things, how they do things, just all this stuff about user interviews and understanding what your user is doing. You'd be surprised how much that's glossed over. Anticipating interactions, like this person's going to be going into a place with no connection. Let's make sure that they have a way to be able to grab their information. And then the third is, designing and developing around your unique context. So the big picture, I know what my user is doing, I know where they're going, I know what they want to do. Let's build something around that. So we have this kind of motto that it's everything and all the time. And so that kind of goes to show that user experience is not just wireframing. It's not just this process of drawing boxes and moving things around. It's basically the entire process of building the application. When you're designing user experience, you're designing the experience for the user, and that means the whole experience. So thank you. If you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer them.